Welcome back to the channel. As you know, I created this channel to focus primarily on issues involving life and money for people over 50, and a big one obviously is health. And I want to talk about the stent that I received a few days ago, and this is in my left anterior descending artery. And I don't want to talk about it from the standpoint of like why I had to get a stent, or from the standpoint of what a stent is, or how the future is going to be for people that have a stent, because I see quite a bit of content online about that. But I don't see a lot of content about what the actual procedure is like and what it was like for me, what they did, what I felt during the procedure, and what my experience was, just so that other people can see this video and see what my experience was. It doesn't mean that other people that are going to have a stent are going to have the same experience that I had. For once, I did not have to get one on an emergency basis. I did not have a heart attack or a stroke or anything of the sort. This was a procedure that was planned after an angiogram. I went in by myself, not with an ambulance. Was not an emergency situation, like I said. And so my experience can be different from the experience of others in that sense. But there are many people that get these procedures every year, hundreds of thousands, as a matter of fact, in the United States alone, millions in the world. And I wanted to give my contribution. And my contribution is like, I want to tell the story of what my day was like when I got my stent. I got my stent in Southern California. I live in the Los Angeles area. And so I got it at one of the major hospitals here in Southern California. So I got to the hospital at about 9 in the morning. My procedure was set for 11:30 a.m. And my wife dropped me off, and I had to do check-in. So I had to do some bureaucracy, sign all the paperwork. You know, there are waivers, obviously, that you have to sign. They go through all the financial stuff with you. I had already taken care of it. My insurance paid for most of my procedure. And then after that was done, I was escorted upstairs by a volunteer to the cath lab. When I got to the cath lab, they removed all my jewelry. I only had like a necklace with a cross, so it's not like I had to remove a lot of stuff. But what happens, at least happened to me, is that I got to the floor. They took me to a bay, which was like a bed with a bunch of machines and a curtain where I could have some privacy. And at that point, they had me remove all my clothes, and they only kept my underwear, and I had to put on like a gown, a hospital gown. So then I laid down on the bed there. They gave me like a nice heated blanket, which was nice. And then the nurse came to talk to me. And they get kind of like your vitals, your blood pressure, then they get a history of the medications that you're taking, and so they get some basic information. And then at that point, they put me on an IV for hydration, because one of my requirements was that I was supposed to not have any food or drink after midnight, the night before my procedure. So you get to the hospital, it's like 9:30, 10, you haven't been drinking for like 10 hours, so you're kind of dehydrated. So they put you on an IV, which was nice. I actually kind of like felt better and comfortable there at that point. And after about 10 minutes, they came and took my blood, and I asked why they would do it. They said that they would take your coagulation information. So I think that the most important aim of taking my blood was to check my coagulation, because obviously it's an important factor when you get a procedure like a stent. Then at that point, I had to wait for a couple of hours, and I had already gone through a similar experience when I did my angiogram, and so I knew that there was some waiting involved, and they had to wait for the blood test results for the most part, but also for other procedures to end, because there are many bays and I can see people being escorted in and out. And obviously there are also people that maybe they are on an emergency basis because they go to the ER, they have a heart attack or shortness of breath or whatever it is that people need to take care of. Around 2 o'clock, and this is about 2 hours or 3 hours late, they gave me medication. They gave me a Valium and they gave me Benadryl. And the pill of Valium was to get me a little sleepy, because when they do these procedures, usually you are awake, and I was awake for the most part that I can remember. And then they gave me Benadryl, and they said that the Benadryl is for the contrast, because when they give you contrast to do the procedure to see where your blood flow is, they need to give you some cortisone in case you have allergic reaction. Then about half an hour, 45 minutes later, I was escorted to the cath lab. When I got to the cath lab, there was about 4 people there, 2 nurses and 2 assistants. And you get removed from your bed and put on the cath lab bed, which is a bed right next to a big giant TV. It's like a 50-inch TV, and that's where the doctor gets to see the images of your heart. So I get to lay down there, and they prepped my wrist and my groin, because they told me that they would go in from my wrist if possible, but that the groin was a possibility. So basically they remove all of your hair from your groin and your wrist if there's any. They applied some kind of like dye there, which is, I think it's for cleaning the area. And then I got to lay down. They put some heavy blankets on me. I think it's some stuff because their x-ray machine that is working while they do the catheterization, and so they need to protect your parts and all of your organs. They don't need to be exposed from the x-rays. And then after 5 to 10 minutes, my doctor came. I already knew my doctor. Again, this is not an emergency. This is a doctor I've seen a couple of times. So at that point, I'm telling you what I remember. I think I was awake for the most of it. And they told me after the procedure that they gave me some heparin. And the heparin, I believe, is to dilute the blood. But then a couple of days ago, I accessed the medical records online, and I saw that they gave me like 6 or 7 other medications. They gave me 2 micrograms of fentanyl. I think that's to get you even more sleepy. And then they gave me the heparin, like I said. Then they gave me some nitroglycerin. I believe is during the procedure, it's for the pain, the nitroglycerin. And I was able to see some things what they were doing. I could distinctly see in the screen next to me, because if I was tilting my head, I could see the screen. I know that some people, they may be putting drape in front of your face, in which case you can't see anything. But my experience, again, this video is about my experience, so that you can see what happened to me, and maybe it's gonna happen to you or maybe not. But I wanted to share these kind of like a public service. I know I'm talking about something very personal, but honestly, I don't mind. I do want to share. And so I could see the balloon. Actually, I got to see the balloon. I could see the balloon when they were trying to do the angioplasty go through my artery. And then at some point, I heard the noise like a vacuum. And I believed when I was doing the procedure that that's when they were doing the atherectomy. And the atherectomy is when they use some kind of tool that gets to remove the calcification inside your artery. It's like pretty amazing stuff if you think about it. They go inside the artery and remove the calcification. And I had confirmation of that in the medical records. I looked a couple of days ago, and the doctor wrote that they did what's called a rotational atherectomy. So basically they're cleaning the artery from the inside. And I don't remember at that point when they put the stent. It's not that they always work with the dye. And like I said, you're kind of sleepy. I remember most of it, but I think the procedure lasted about an hour. So I can't be sure 100% of everything that they did. Some of it I know from the medical records. At that point, they told me that the procedure was over. I remember the doctor showing to me on the screen what the blood flow looked like before the procedure and what it looked like afterwards, and obviously it looked a lot better. The doctor was very happy, and I was very happy to hear that. I asked the doctor how many stents they put. I knew that they were gonna put one, but you never know. And they told me that they put one, and I asked how long the stent was, and they told me that it was 38 millimeters. So this is almost a 4 centimeter stent. I actually got a warranty. Literally, when you walk out of the hospital, they hand you a brochure that has the serial number of your stent, which makes sense because it's a product like any other product that they put into your body. And so if there was any issue in the future, which what product it is, you want to find out. So it's a Boston Scientific made stent that I got. And it's my stent I saw in the brochure. It's titanium and chromium, and it's a drug eluting stent. And it elutes a drug that it's helping with the rejection, I believe. I think it's called Elivimus or something like that, the medicine that it elutes. But in any event, it's a new generation stent, the drug eluting stent that I think are supposed to help with the rejection. And so at that point, the procedure was over, and during the procedure, I want to describe what I felt. At some point, I felt my heart skipping a little bit. At some point, I felt some kind of chest pain that was pretty pronounced, and I believe that may have been when they were doing the angioplasty, because I think that they block a little bit the flow of the blood, and so it can create some pain. That makes sense, but at least that's what I felt. I don't know exactly why, but again, I just want to share what I experienced during the procedure. And then I was done. They wheeled me back to the bay where I was, and I had a bracelet. Basically, they put on my wrist a bracelet that they pump and that they make really, really tight on your wrist with air. Basically, they were using a syringe to throw air into this bracelet, and the bracelet was holding my wrist really, really firm and really, really tight. And the reason why they do that, the nurse explained to me, is that with the medicines that they give you to make your blood more liquid, and also with the other medication that you may be taking by yourself because of your heart conditions, there may be problems with coagulation. And so they need to have this thing tight also because they got in from the wrist, and so there's a cut there. And they told me that the doctor has said that I could leave by 7 p.m. as long as my wrist was not bleeding. And so that was at that point the goal of the nurse, is to stop the bleeding in my wrist. And by the time that I got back to the bay and I was done with the procedure, it was 4 p.m. So that meant that the doctor wanted me to stay there for 3 hours in observation. And there, when you're there in observation, also they check your blood pressure and all these things. They make sure you're okay. And I felt okay, honestly. I felt the same way that I felt when I was wheeled out. For some reason, the medication didn't have like a big effect on me, or maybe I was just sleeping, and when it stopped having an effect, I was wide awake. But in any event, that was my impression of the medication. But the problem I had is that my wrist kept bleeding, and they really couldn't stop it with this bracelet. So I had like a really very nice nurse that came and sat next to me for about 45 minutes around 6 o'clock, and she really spent half an hour holding my wrist tight and pushing on my vein. And God bless her, that worked. Around 6:30 my bleeding stopped, and that meant that I could go home that night. I couldn't drive. They told me that I couldn't drive. You know, my wife picked me up at the end of the day. It was about 7 p.m. when I left, and I was kind of tired because, you know, it's a long day and it's a stressful day and you get a lot of medication, and so I'm not surprised that I was tired. And also I was a little stressed out going in. You know, this isn't like, you know, just something that is like a regular occurrence in a person's life to go in and get a procedure like this. But obviously it was good. They told me it went well. Who knows what the future will be? That will depend. But I'm optimistic. And in the discharge instructions, they told me that I couldn't operate a car for 24 hours. They told me to be very careful lifting weights for 4 or 5 days. And again, these were just the discharge instructions they gave to me. It doesn't mean that this is what's gonna be given to you. Your condition may be different, but that was my day. I wanted to share my day of when I got my heart stent. That's what happened from the morning till the evening when I got home. I wanted to share that. I hope that this video is useful for people, is useful for you. If anything, it gives you an idea of what people go through that get these kinds of procedures. Okay? And I may give some updates in the future if I have other procedures, hopefully not, or any other problems. I believe the health is a big part of life, obviously. And so I wanted to share. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button, please hit the subscribe button. I talk a lot on this channel about issues of money, investments, finance, and all that. These are things that are of a lot of interest to me, and I'm gonna keep sharing about those issues as I'm gonna keep sharing about things that may regard health. Thank you for watching.